Welcome to the Deep Dive. Today, we're stepping back, way back into medieval Europe. Think 1348. Imagine Southwark, London, cobblestones, flickering oil lamps.
Yeah.
It's atmospheric, right? And here in the area they call the stews, you'd see women marked out. Striped hoods, yellow ribbons, the Winchester geese, maybe someone like Marguerite, young, but already showing signs of mercury treatment for the French pox, standing in a doorway. It's a stark image.
It really is. And it sets the scene perfectly for what we're exploring today.
Exactly. Our mission is to get past the myths about medieval prostitution. It wasn't hidden away. It was sanctioned, regulated, profitable, and, well, utterly brutal for the women involved.
And the core question is that paradox. How did a society steeped in Christian virtue manage to profit from and condemn this trade all at the same time?
So get ready, because you, our listener, are about to uncover a hidden side of history.
Surprising facts.
Deep contradictions, things that, still echo today. Let's dive in.
It is a huge paradox when you first encounter. You've got these great universities debating the finest points of sin.
Yeah.
Paris, Oxford.
Right, the intellectual centers.
Exactly. And then in those same cities, you have licensed brothels, openly taxed by the authorities. It wasn't seen as hypocrisy quite like we view it now.
Okay, so how do they square that circle? Especially the church. I mean, wasn't it the moral authority? How did they justify it?
A lot of it comes down to Thomas Aquinas, a massive figure in medieval thought. He essentially argued it was a necessary evil.
A necessary evil.
Yeah. His famous line compares it to sewage in a palace. Unpleasant, sure, but you remove it, and the whole place becomes corrupted. He said, remove prostitutes, and you will unsettle everything because of lusts.
That's quite a statement. So the idea was sacrifice some women to channel male lust, protect honest women, keep society orderly.
Pretty much the lesser evil principle, and this theological idea became very practical policy because, let's be honest, people profited.
Who benefited most?
Well, the church, ironically. Bishops often controlled districts where brothels operated, like in London, and collected taxes. And the crown, definitely. Royal treasuries got a boost from licensing fees. So, despite condemning the sin, they were economically tied to the trade.
A theological and financial paradox. So with money involved, how do they actually manage this? How was it regulated across Europe?
It was pretty elaborate and varied place to place. Take London, like you mentioned. The Bishop of Winchester had effectively total control over the Southwark stews. His bailiff was collecting fees, yes, but also inspecting and enforcing rules.
And that wasn't unique to London, right? What about Paris?
Similar idea in Paris, under royal control. Specific districts like the Clépier or Glatigny, royal officials under the provost of Paris managed it all, and it brought in significant revenue.
Venice always seems to have its own complex way of doing things.
Oh, absolutely. Venice had this clear hierarchy. You had the courtisanes, the honest courtesans, very high class, catering to the elite. Then the cortigiane di lume, the prostitutes of the lamp, for the sort of middle tier. And then common streetwalkers for sailors, laborers. Each group had different rules, different taxes. Very stratified.
And in Germany, it sounds like it was almost run like a public utility.
That's a great way to put it. Cities like Nuremberg, Augsburg, Frankfurt, they ran municipal brothels, the Frauenhäuser, women's houses. The city council managed them, set prices, hours.
And the profits
went into public works, city walls, bridges. It's a really stark image, isn't it? Women's bodies as, well, literal building blocks for the city.
It really is. Beyond the finances, though, society marked these women physically. These sumptuary laws. Tell us about those. How were they enforced?
Right. These weren't fashion choices. They were deliberate markers of shame, badges of degradation. In Florence, it was yellow. Yellow sleeves, veils, trim, and strict rules. No silk, no gold, no fur.
So instantly identifiable.
Instantly. Milan used white cloaks. Toulouse, striped clothing. Avignon, a white tag and aiguillette on the shoulder. Bern, red caps. Vienna, yellow scarves. It was all about visibility and control.
And it wasn't just clothes. Their movement was restricted, too.
Exactly. They couldn't be on the streets during certain times, like religious festivals. They were barred from churches during Mass, couldn't join guild celebrations. Certain areas were off limits. The main market in Augsburg, near schools or convents in Toulouse. It was spatial control, too.
How is this enforced?
Often brutally. Guards did inspections. Violations meant fines, public punishments, sometimes expulsion from the city. And the public shaming, riding backward on a donkey in Germany, whipping in Paris, being paraded through London in a sheet with a shaved head.
Humiliating. And public.
Very public. It reinforced boundaries, entertained the crowd, showed the authorities' power, and, crucially, forced the women to internalize that shame.
The psychological weight of that. Constantly visible, constantly judged. It must have been crushing. But behind these rules and systems were real women. Tell us about their lives.
Yes, this is where it gets incredibly tough. Because behind the regulations was often sheer desperation. Think of someone like Agnès la Bouquetière in 14th century Paris,
Okay.
orphaned by the plague at 12. No dowry, no family support, no access to guilds. What options did she have? Domestic service was hard to find. Marriage, impossible without a dowry. So her path likely started with debt. A brothel keeper offers food, clothes, a roof.
But at a cost she could never repay.
Precisely. It wasn't really a choice. It was exploitation of vulnerability. Recruitment often involved scouts finding young women, perhaps runaways or orphans, offering help, but hiding the true nature of the work until they were already dependent, already indebted.
And once they were in, escape sounds impossible.
Nearly. The debts just mounted: room, board, clothes, protection fees, fines, all carefully calculated to keep them trapped. They couldn't leave the designated districts without permission. Churches, festivals, most other jobs were barred to them. And if they had children, those children carried the stigma, too.
The physical dangers must have been immense as well.
Horrendous. STDs were everywhere. Gonorrhea, the burning was common. And then around 1495, syphilis arrived, the French pox. That was often lethal. The rashes, the decay, the mental deterioration. Women with symptoms were often just cast out or locked away in pest houses.
And pregnancy.
Frequent, incredibly dangerous, and often unwanted. Infant mortality was sky high. We see records like Marie de Bretagne in Paris, 4 children in 6 years. Only 1 survived past infancy. Marie herself died at 23.
Just devastating, that story. It puts a human face on the statistics, doesn't it?
It really does. It reminds you, these weren't just entries in a ledger. They faced violence constantly. Clients could be brutal, and the women had little recourse. Courts rarely believed a prostitute's word against a man's.
It's like the case of Isabelle de Tours.
Exactly. Beaten by a client who refused to pay. She complains, but her testimony is dismissed because of her profession. And she gets fined for disturbing the peace by screaming. The system was utterly stacked against them. Even the guards meant to protect the districts often preyed on them instead.
So physical danger, disease. What was the psychological toll, living under that constant condemnation?
It's hard to fully grasp. They were told by the church, by society, that they were sinners, damned, cut off from the religious community, no communion, no church marriage, often no proper burial. This spiritual isolation, combined with everything else, it led to despair. High rates of suicide attempts, substance abuse to cope. Many just internalized the shame, using the same hateful terms for themselves that society used.
It's a truly bleak picture. Let's look inside the brothels themselves, the actual spaces. What were they like?
We have good descriptions, especially from places like Nuremberg. Their Frauenhaus, built 1396, was quite documented. A 3-story building, prominent street, distinctive red door.
Red door, okay.
Ground floor was a tavern for clients. Upstairs, small rooms, very basic bed, wash basin, maybe a chest. Not hidden away, very much an institution.
And the rules inside, how controlled was it?
Extremely. Run by a city-appointed manager, the Frauenwirt. Strict hours, noon to 10 p.m., closed during Lent, Advent, standard prices. For the dozen or so women living there, it was like institutional servitude.
Could they leave?
Only with permission. They were always in debt for room, board, clothes, even medical care. The debt was the chain, and they had to accept any paying client. Refusal meant punishment, fines, or being thrown out.
You mentioned London had rules that supposedly protected women from being held against their will or for unfair debt. How did that play out in reality?
Mostly theoretical. Yes, the Bishop of Winchester's regulations said that. But what was unreasonable debt, it was inflated to cover everything. Recruitment costs, food, protection fees, and the bailiff enforcing the rules. Often paid by the brothel keepers, there was little real protection.
Okay, so even with written rules, the reality was grim. But what about those high-class Venetian courtesans? The courtigian one asked, was their life genuinely better, freer?
On the surface, yes. They lived in relative luxury, sometimes in nice houses, entertained powerful men with wit, music, poetry. Many were well-educated, which was rare for women then. Veronica Franco is a famous example. She even published poetry.
So some achieved a level of fame.
Some did. But Franco's own writings show the anxiety, the vulnerability, fear of losing favor, difficulty protecting her children from the stigma. It was a gilded cage. They had huge expenses, licenses, taxes, wardrobes, entertaining, often relied on male agents who took a big cut or got indebted to merchants.
Like Caterina Sandilli.
Right, a noblewoman who became a courtesan and ended up trapped by debt to her mentor for her training. So even at the top, they faced constant scrutiny, legal threats, potential ruin. They were still commodities, just more expensive ones.
So regardless of status, control and exploitation were constants. Now this system lasted for centuries, but then things changed quite dramatically in the late medieval, early modern period. Brothels started closing. What drove that shift?
It was a perfect storm of factors, really. Syphilis arriving in the late 1400s was massive. It was terrifying, disfiguring, often deadly. Reformers seized on it this was God's punishment, physical proof of the dangers of prostitution.
So disease gave the moral arguments real teeth.
Absolutely. And you had powerful religious reformers, both Protestant Luther, Calvin, and Catholic, like Savonarola in Florence. They flat out rejected Aquinas' necessary evil idea. For them, Christian society couldn't tolerate sin like this.
And were there social changes too?
Yes, big ones. The rise of the middle class, the bourgeoisie, brought new values emphasis on marital fidelity, sexual restraint, public respectability. Openly tolerated brothels just didn't fit that worldview. Plus, cities were growing, becoming more crowded, and brothels got linked to crime, disorder, disease spreading.
So how did the closures actually happen? Did they just shut down overnight?
Sometimes it was gradual, sometimes sudden. Often authorities would first tighten the screws, raise fees, add more restrictions, more inspections, making legal brothels less profitable. Then the final closure.
Like in Augsburg.
Exactly. 1532, the city just closed its Frauenhaus, gave the women minimal notice, no support, told many to just leave town. Nuremberg followed, Paris, Venice, mostly in the mid to late 16th century.
And the impact on the women must have been devastating.
Utterly. For most, it meant destitution. Where could they go? Many were forced into clandestine prostitution, far more dangerous, no regulations, no protection at all. Others became beggars, vagrants. A few might end up in Magdalene houses run by the church. But capacity was tiny, and life inside was incredibly harsh.
So closing the brothels didn't end prostitution.
Not at all. It just pushed it underground, made it invisible, harder to tax, harder to regulate, harder to monitor for health. More importantly, it solved none of the root causes: poverty, lack of opportunities for women, inequality.
So the suffering didn't stop, it just became hidden.
Exactly. The reformers could claim a moral victory because the visible brothels were gone. But they arguably made life even more dangerous for the women and created new problems of crime and public health. It was a solution that swept the problem and the people under the rug.
It's such a stark picture we painted today. This medieval system, so intricate, so legally and economically embedded, built around something it's simultaneously called sinful, and the human cost, overwhelmingly borne by these women.
It really was a society grappling with its own contradictions, trying to impose order, but creating this deeply exploitative structure.
It really makes you think, doesn't it? That final thought for you, our listener. How do our own societies today deal with the necessary evils we perceive, or perhaps create? And whose suffering might we be making invisible, consciously or unconsciously, in the name of social order or convenience?
It's a question that resonates, unfortunately. The mechanisms change, but the vulnerability of certain groups and society's willingness to look away, that seems persistent.
A powerful point to consider. Thank you for joining us on this deep dive. We'll see you next time.